See that one there, the one out in the middle of the lake?
Turlough O'Connor chap.
Oh, he was one of the O'Connors of the High Kings of Ireland.
Okay.
Turlough O'Connor's family were supposed to be responsible for making the Tully Cross. Or having it made, or sponsoring the making of it.
And there's another full circle then, isn't it?
1456, a Lachlan O'Hanley was slain in a succession dispute on that crannog. You see, crannogs were connected in certain instances to the mainland by pathways. These pathways were under the water, just under, because it was all about a safe space.
Hello and welcome to the special edition of the Aughrim History Society podcast, Echoes of the Past. A discussion based on the 3 national schools projects in 2024. I'm Ronán Turner, a local musician and a blow-in, soon becoming a lifetime resident of this incredible place that we call home around here, Kilmore in County Roscommon. Today we're diving into the rich history that surrounds us, the landmarks we pass every day and the stories buried in the fields, legacies left behind by those who walked this land many years before us. Joining me today is a local historian, Camilla Kelly, someone who's dedicated the years of uncovering and preserving Kilmore's past. Together we'll be exploring some of the fascinating highlights uncovered by the school's projects, including the story of the Tully Cross, local monastic settlement and much, much more. So whether you're tuning in right here in Roscommon or listening back afar, sit back, relax and let's take a journey through the past, one story at a time. Hello, Camilla.
Good evening, Ronán.
Very good.
Lovely to meet you.
It is indeed, and thanks for taking the time out of your day and for putting together this amazing project, which I have to say is, when I saw it first, I was fascinated.
Oh, thank you.
Being just a blow-in, as I said, to the area, but I love history, I love castles, I love monuments, crannogs, you name it. I love the fact that you pointed out the first thing we said was, before we start this, you see over there, you know, we both look out on this amazing lakeland, which is so cool. But maybe you could bring us back to the beginnings of Kilmore, or tell us a little bit of what we need to know about the earliest settlers in the area that you know of or that we know of.
Yeah, to the extent that we're aware of that.
Yes.
That's a big question in its own right. But I'll certainly do my best with that. But before we start at all, I just want to say that really the history of this fascinating area is informed by its wonderful landscape. And that landscape is dominated by the beautiful River Shannon, which borders the parish from Jamestown almost to Strokestown and meanders out into those fabulous lakes, both in Boderg, Kidlass and Grange, and then the 22 smaller lakes, which are tributaries of the Shannon. Why am I telling you that? That's important because that informed the early history of this parish. And that early history, if we look around at our landscape here, is dotted with what's called crannogs. And crannogs, to me, are almost the earliest evidence that we have today of early settlement in this area.
What you're describing there, in a way, the waterways were like the roadways and the networks.
Yeah, the waterway was the superhighway, because we have to remember that there were no roadways. There was no esker to walk on top of. It's a lowland area, mostly flooded with water in the winter time of the year. And we have to remember that before the major drainage schemes of the late 1800s and then in the 1950s, in the winter time of the year, most people in this area lost quite a lot of land to the lakes and the Shannon. So it probably wasn't their friend as we would see it today. But in those days, it's an important point in terms of providing those superhighways for people as they try to traverse this landscape. Yeah, and I suppose the one monument that we have, which we're very clear evidence for, is the Dune at Drumsna. And this is a fortification which straddles between the parish of it's the last townland in the parish, which is called Ardnafrin, and it follows along just on the Roscommon side of Jamestown, and it comes along by the road that we would all go to Carrick-on-Shannon, and it comes over towards Drumsna.
Okay.
And why was that there? That was there because at that point of the Shannon, it was the lowest point. And if you were a clan chief, you would cross that area with your horses and your armies. So it was in nobody's interest, particularly on this side with the O'Connors, because they fancied themselves as the High Kings of Ireland, even in the 5th century.
Right.
And they built this dune at Drumsna, and it's still there today. The archaeological evidence is there for that today.
That's cool. I must go have a look at it.
That covers right across the whole way from Ardnafron to Drumsna.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And there's other evidence of those kind of fortifications across Europe, but just in the Irish context, that would be the earliest large-scale monument that we would have in this area.
That's in Drumsna. So that's
between Ardnafron, which most of the locals would know. That's the last townland in our parish before you reach Jamestown.
Okay, so this is
and then straddling, if you like, in a semicircle across to Drumsna.
Okay.
Yeah, and not far from.
We'll have to put a map on this podcast so that you can see it.
Absolutely, that people can see that,
yeah.
And we have that included as one of the fantastic projects that the pupils developed when we were doing the school history projects in 2024. So that's certainly in there. So that would be the earliest evidence.
When I looked through the books, and I'd love to have gone into depth in all of the stories because they're pretty rich.
Yeah, they're amazing.
And it was a really interesting perspective that, taking it from the kids' point of view and the conversational point of view, in a way, it's how orally was how we passed down stories. It was always done through oral. So in a way, it's nice that there's little nuances and additions to the stories, that gets a bit more colour as it gets passed down to the generations. So hearing those stories back through the kids is brilliant. I think it's a great perspective to look at it.
Yeah.
And it also gets the kids really interested in their area and where their roots are from and where they're from, But I picked out 2 or 3 different elements that I was interested in. The first that kind of tweaked my interest is a very obvious one, and maybe people aren't aware of it, but the Tully Cross, and such an iconic symbol and found locally. Maybe you give us a brief kind of story behind it and why it's so important.
Yeah, well, the Tully Cross, obviously, which is in the National Museum of Ireland and is in the Room of Treasures, which is now on display as part of the international exhibition of St. Gall, which are the manuscripts that were returned to Ireland after 1,000 years. How marvellous is that?
Wow.
And the Tully Cross is dating from the same period.
That's amazing.
I mean, the Tully Cross is 400 years older than the Cross of Cong.
Wow.
It's that significant. But the Tully Cross, which is either late 8th or early 9th century, is an example of a metal encased wooden cross. It's a processional cross, and that's important in the story because we'll come to that later. Why was that a processional cross? It is the only large intact example in Ireland of a processional cross.
Okay, and maybe you tell me
century.
The processional cross, I assume it's for procession?
This was obviously a cross that was made, and we now know that it was the Cross of Cong, which later became called the Cross of Cong because it was found in a bog in Cong. But we now know that the Cross of Cong was also made near Elphin in County Roscommon.
Wow.
And we know that the Tully Cross was made near Elphin in County Roscommon, okay. But what's really interesting about that is that the ancient diocese of Elphin, which was before 1872, when the diocese became the diocese from Sligo, the Catholic diocese, the ancient diocese of Elphin included not alone Elphin, but Elphin, Creve, into Aughrim, into Clooncraft, and into Kilmore.
Oh, you've got
this map here, what I've done is I've coloured in all of the waterways, all of these superhighways across to Elphin, and as you can very clearly see, here's the Archdiocese of Elphin here, and here's Clooncraft.
Okay.
Just following along the waterway.
That's fantastic, really.
So I'm thinking about if I was living in a monastic settlement and I was looking at my own security, but in the meantime we were busy making these crosses, I would be using these superhighways to cross over and back to my Granog or my monastic settlement at Clooncraft with my processional cross. So they were obviously using these crosses in a way that was their devotion in the early Christian period in Ireland. That's and cool. The fact that we have in our own parish the only intact Irish example is wonderful to have.
It's amazing.
So, as you know, it was found by a diver off of Crannog in Tully Lake, and Tully Lake is just here. And as it happens, just coincidentally behind Scrabba School. So that's where that project came from. So, it was found in the late 1980s. So the Tully Cross was found by a diver engaged in an unapproved search of the environment around the small Crannog at Tully Lake in the late 1980s. And we know that they attempted to sell it in the United States of America. And the museum in America that they had communicated with immediately recognised the Tully Cross for what it was and contacted the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin.
Okay.
And to their great credit, they did that.
Yeah.
And the great Eamon Kelly, who is the keeper of antiquities at the National Museum of Ireland, knocked on this gentleman's door on Christmas Eve with a large bottle of whiskey. And when this gentleman answered the door, he said, have you something you'd like to tell me?
You just left it at that.
And he left it at that. And that was the story. And I think that's a very clever, a great way to approach it, because instead of suing people under the National Monuments Act, they were able to bring back the Tully Cross to the National Museum.
Which is
and
amazing.
To restore it to the beauty that it is today. Yeah.
You wonder how many treasures don't get brought back that way. Do you know that go on the black market and that...
I don't know that. I think
somewhere.
People are so well informed now that probably doesn't happen as much as it did. But in years gone by, I'm sure there was. Yeah, yeah.
I know the Sheila and the Gig. They're very popular.
yeah.
They're always getting taken out and chipped out of and sold in the black market.
Yeah, because you see deconsecrated churches all over Ireland, and there might be a Sheila and a Gig, and maybe somebody thinks it's not that important. And after all, it's just maybe a stone with the carving on it, and maybe that is. But it's hard to know, Ronan, because there's so much of that.
There is.
But I'm not looking at it from that point of view.
The Tully Cross. So it's in the National Museum. It's still there. It's on display.
Absolutely.
And people can go in and have a look at that.
Absolutely.
And tell their friends.
Yeah. Yeah, but at the moment it's in special exhibition celebrating the return of those wonderful manuscripts dedicated to St. Gall.
And they were returned
from
they returned from what, Viking settlements, is it?
They were taken to Switzerland.
Were they in Switzerland?
Yeah. Well, this is part of the story, because the reality of it is that the Iron Age settlements in Ireland, Crannogs, where did that building structure come from? And we now know that they came from that area of Central Europe, because we're not quite sure how people came across to Ireland.
Okay.
So the early Iron Age settlements were Crannogs, and those Crannogs are evidenced in Central Europe, in places around Switzerland and Austria. And then they appeared in Ireland.
I mean, there's so much history in these books. I mean, literally, every page is a piece of history in it. Again, I wanted to look at things that I see every day on my walks and my runs around the area.
Okay.
One of them was the monastic. It's a big graveyard, and I believe it's tied into.
Is it the monastic site at Clooncraft? That's a very early one as well. That's 8th century. Into today, it is a graveyard. But in the 8th century, it was a monastic settlement. Now, unfortunately, Ronan, there's no evidence of the monastic settlement today other than the very clear circular wall and ditch that is still there.
Yeah.
And that's clear evidence. And again, it's on a height. It's also just up from one of these lakes. And it's on the route between the ancient diocese of Elphin and the Clooncraft Lake, and then down onto the Shannon here. So how did people access that? How did people create the monastic settlement? How did they come to be there is the question. So what I'm saying again is that people would have traversed these superhighways, and this would have been a place that people could carry on their business safely because it was hidden from view, surrounded by trees, because Ireland was surrounded by trees, and put this gorgeous circular wall around, and you can still see it today.
It must have had some aspect to it. So the reason that it's on a hill, because I'm trying to tie it in.
Yeah.
Like I look in my bird's eye view to where the nearest water point access is.
Yeah.
And I know back in the day there was they had all these different ways and pathways and that they traversed, like the mass paths, etc.
Yeah.
And I know that in Jamestown there was other monastic elements as well, wasn't there, around Jamestown, or did I read that wrong?
Oh yeah, but that's much.
Yeah. That's not tied in together.
That's not tied to this one in particular.
Right.
But I would be inclined to say the one at Cloncraft was very much tied to the monastic settlement at Elphin.
Okay.
And then following on from that, if we were to follow the natural route of the Shannon, and then we would follow down towards Tully Lake, why did the cross end up? Why did the Tully cross end up at Tully Lake?
Because it's really out of the way.
Yeah, well, it's not.
Was it ever connected?
It's not if you connect it by water.
Right.
So the water comes directly across from here, just behind us here.
Yeah.
Coming across up towards Tully Lake, and up towards Tully Lake from the bog, just down here at Cloncraft.
Yeah.
Because Cloncraft, the bog is just in front of it there. So there's a waterway that traverses the whole way along there, comes out at a place called the Ford, locally.
Is it still there?
And and goes right across the road, right across the new road, and down into Tully Lake.
But it's only tiny waterway.
Yeah, it's tiny now, but
it may have been a lot bigger, obviously, back then. Okay.
Yeah.
But tell me about the monastic settlers and who they were. Do we know anything about them? Brothers or monks or...
I suppose our worldview of them was that they were holy men, but it wasn't just about that. It was about groups of people coming together, living a hermetic life, if you like.
Okay.
But you'd have had carpenters, you'd have stonemasons, you'd have people working with leather, you'd have your butcher, you know.
So regular
and
villages.
You'd have your abbot and you'd have your scribe.
Okay.
You might have 3 or 4 scribes, in fact.
Right.
And they would be leading that monastic, that settled life, and a lot of that might have been just about their own security and getting away from, if you like, tyranny, maybe getting away from the Roman Empire at the time, and that maybe that's why a lot of them came to Ireland, because the Roman Empire never came here.
Would there be any particular local legends or folklore that maybe you could add to this tapestry that maybe isn't included in the notes, something a bit different? And if there isn't,
well, I think what surprised me about it was the number of stories and the amount of folklore connected with townland names.
Okay, brilliant.
Which I found fascinating.
Yeah.
Because where did we get those townland names? They obviously emerged from the local folklore. And one that I picked out in particular, and I wanted to read it to you, I thought it was really interesting. The townland is called Ardlecra. There's a tradition which tells that there's a crock of gold in Ardlecra Fort. The people of the district believed that gold will be revealed if the person dreams it off for 3 nights in succession without telling anyone. In the morning, following the 3rd night, he must go at an early hour to the fort. When digging, he must not take his attention off the spot, as if he looks behind him, the gold will be gone. It is said that a man who had dreamt of it for 3 nights was digging when a fairy tapped on his shoulder. The man, forgetting, looked behind him and was buried in Killummid townland about 25 years ago.
Wow, that's brilliant.
So that's a great story of hidden treasure.
That's brilliant.
So I think we should all go over to Ardlecra Fort. Ardlecna, Ardleckna Fort.
Very cool.
And that's a townland in Aughrim.
So whereabouts that be now? I'm just going to take out my notes.
That'd be just as the
my shovel.
As the crow flies, we'd say about 3 to 4 miles from here.
Okay.
Because we're near to Scrabba and it's near to Aughrim School.
Brilliant.
So those stories based on the place names really attracted my attention when I saw it, because I hadn't realised that there was such a rich diversity of history surrounding the place names. Like some of them are, like Grange, for example. What does Grange mean? Grange is a place for grain, and generally amnestic granary.
Okay, what's
whatever
that
that means.
Yeah, is that?
Yeah, we need to look that up.
We could. Amnestic.
Hill Street, or Lacknagan, that's the little village. Lacken is a hillside. Lissadurn is the fort of the fist.
That's great.
Great story attached to Lissadurn. Rockville is Canoy's Rock. Kilbride, of course, Kill being the Irish for church. Kilbride, the Church of St. Bridget. That's a fairly obvious one.
Yeah.
And Killinadden, the wood of the streamlet. Kilcroy, the hardwood. Killummid, the Church of St. Lomond. Knocknaganna, the hill of the calves. Lissanernan, the fort of the little yew trees. And Lishew is Hugh's fort.
Wow.
So those are just some of the place names in the Aughrim end of the parish, and for which the pupils took great delight in explaining what those place names meant. So I really enjoyed those. And they just tell a story.
They do, in themselves.
Yeah, and of course we all know about John O'Donovan in 1832, 1834, the poor man that was given the job of anglicising and creating the townlands of Ireland. And unfortunately a lot of the words were anglicised. But to the great credit in this area, we seem to have held on to the traditional names for townlands and place names. And of course that goes with the parish in which we live, is that it's that ancient place where it seems as if nothing's happening, but there's quite a lot going on at the same time.
But I suppose from your perspective, what's one part of Kilmore's history that's often overlooked and deserves way more attention?
Oh gosh, there's so much I could say there. I think mapping the history of this parish, which was squeezed between two huge landed estates from the 17th century. At a first glance, it seems as if there's nothing here and nothing going on, and yet hidden within that is all of the impacts of that and what happened. Because the issue there is that, apart from the fact that we had the penal laws, which meant that people couldn't speak their own language, and it was an oral tradition, and we had the Brehon laws, and that was an oral tradition, and the way people lived their lives was based on that oral tradition. Part of me thinks that a lot of that might have been lost. And parallel to that, you have these two enormous estates were developed at Strokestown, Mahon's at Strokestown, and the King's at Rockingham. Well, King House in Boyle and later Rockingham. And they would have extended, they extended right up to here on this side, just here looking at this lake today. That was owned by the Mahons of Strokestown, right up to here. Right up to here, this where we're sitting at this moment. Well, we're in Carthren Heartland, yeah. And this was this piece of land was owned by Baron Heartland, one of the Mahons, I wanted to show you two maps that I came upon.
And again, we're going to scan these and we'll put them on.
You have to scan these and put them on. It's very hard to make out this map. This is a very early, very, very early map. You can just about see the road on it there. But this map was developed in September 1778 by Roland Sweeney. And it was for Reverend Mahon. And it was to look at a mapping Clongloshna, Le Carrow and the parish of Kilmore in the barony of County Roscommon.
Wow.
It's extremely difficult to read now because it's very faint. And it says the road from Strokestown to Boyle as if we didn't exist in the middle.
Amazing.
I see this all the time. There's, you've got the landed estates in Ireland. That was where the identity was focused. And in between that, it was as if nobody was there. And yet, when I take the early 6-inch maps, Ordnance Survey maps from 1824, you'll see the same roadway, just here. But look at all the tiny dwellings down by the just here. That's just here, just out there.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Look at all the tiny dwellings where people were living. If we turn it that way, you'll see it. Just up here. So people were surviving here all around that time. And why were they living there? Why were they living on the edge of the water like that? How were they getting a living? How were they living? What were they living on? What was going on in these people's lives? I mean, that's all has fascinated me about this area. We seem to know so little about it, and we've very little evidence for it. We have the Singh survey, which was 1746, but that's quite brief on this area. It doesn't really name very many people. The next survey that was done in this area was Griffith's valuation, which in the context of County Roscommon was 1857. So that's quite late.
Okay.
So it's quite a stretch from 1616,
Yeah.
to 1840.
And were they like a census? No.
Yeah.
They were like pre-census
It was a valuation.
census.
It was a valuation census.
Okay.
It was valuing land with the view to tax.
Wow.
But it's a repository. It's a rich repository, and it lists all of the people who would have lived in this area, about townland at that time.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Brilliant to have that.
Yeah.
I know, probably from the wrong perspective, but still.
But to further answer your question, one of the more fascinating aspects of that was that we have a road called the New Road.
Okay.
And the New Road stretches from Curry, just up at the Black Lake where the Silver Reel is today at Grange.
I do know, yeah.
It comes the whole way down this way.
Yeah. It's not the hilly road, it's the other road, is it?
It's this one.
Oh yeah. Okay, cool.
So and the church is actually still on that map.
The half parish.
Yeah, which is now but there's an older church.
Okay.
There was a much older church around the corner from the half parish. This new road was built at the time as a famine relief road, actually. And it stretched all the way down from the half parish down as far as Clogher, quite near Kilmore village.
And when you
the whole way straight down.
When you say a famine relief road, it was built by people during the famine to earn extra money, was it?
By people. It was around 1847 to 1851. There were several relief schemes brought in by the Board of Fresh Fruits, which would have been equivalent, if you like, to our local authority structures. Well, not so much, but the nearest that they could have had at the time. And that was supported by Catherine Mahon in this particular area, because she was sitting on the Board of Fresh Fruits, and she'd be quite interested in relief for the people on their estate at that time, which was just here.
And so am I right then? They would work free labour for food, basically, is it?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we still call it the New Road today.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wouldn't have been an easy thing to build either.
So 200 years later. Yeah. And 46% of the population in this area died during the famine.
That's unreal.
And 30% of the population of County Roscommon died in the famine. So it was one of the highest in Ireland.
So the school project, it was 3 schools.
Yes.
Who were involved in this, and they were Scrabba
School.
Yeah.
And
Dangan
School.
Yeah.
And Aughrim School. Yeah.
What was did they come to you and ask you, do we want to do something in the area? Did you come to them? Was it kind of a collaboration, the teacher said?
Well, I think the motivation behind it was our concern in the History Society about engaging with young people with their own local history and how we were going to do that. Mm-hmm. And that followed on from a broader and a larger conversation about how young people are engaging with history in any case. And there's always this discussion about, it's all about social media and people are not learning history and they're not reading books and they're not engaging with it, And I said, well, look, why don't we try this? Why don't we do a project through the 3 schools? We have a captive audience in our local area, and support them to look at their own landscape and look at their own surroundings, talk to their grandparents, look at their local house, look at their local neighbours, find out what's going on in their local area. And my goodness,
it's amazing
the projects that emerge from that.
And you said it, and we've said it a few times, I suppose, about the oral tradition, and I suppose before smartphones and TVs, these stories would have gone around the homes and down the generations organically. It would have been, sitting around the fire and granddad telling a story about XYZ. Yeah. Sometimes we don't give them the opportunity anymore to pass on the history and the story. We don't have the patience to sit down. So that was the concept of the project. Yeah. Which is brilliant, because I think it's absolutely needed. Yeah. And I think it should be done in every single parish in the country, right? Absolutely. It's the only way we're going to be able to start documenting, and not just documenting, but planting those seeds in the children's brains that even when I walk down the road now and I see, I think another story I mentioned was in Hill Street, there's a gates with 2 white hands, holding the gates, and I think even that's fascinating. You know, it's these little quirks that you don't see. So how was the students' response to it? I mean, clearly it was that, but they were
so engaged with it that, I mean, it just became such a part of their daily lives at school for the whole 6 months that this project was going on. It was amazing. Everybody got involved. The teachers, the support of the teachers was just phenomenal. The time that they gave to it, the artwork, the models, the scale models that they created, the photography, the interviews with neighbours, the interviews with grandparents, you know. The attempt to go onto the Crannog at Tully Lake, somebody's father falling into a hole as he attempted to get to the Crannog. You know, great fun was had by everybody. Everybody walked the local area and everybody picked up on the stories in their own local area. That's exactly what we wanted. We didn't want people just all focusing on one piece, but just on their local area. And that we achieved in spades, and we're delighted with that.
The stories would normally, as I said, be spoken orally and through, you know, retained that way, but generally stayed within the family. This way, the stories get to be shared with the community, the wider community, which will probably have connections with each other, but still, it's nice to be able to share those wider stories so that other people can appreciate.
And if for anybody who's reading them, they'll see there's a significant number of interviews with grandparents. And aunts and uncles, and they're just great. And there's also significant numbers of interviews with neighbours who maybe would have known about the big house in their area, you know, or have come from a big house or be related to them. And that was really interesting as well, to get that perspective. And that was accompanied by drawings. It was poetry, essays, all sorts of photographs, you know. Terrific, absolutely terrific. One particular section in the book from Aughrim School was the story of poetry and letters that they got from people who had kept letters during the time of the famine.
Wow.
Which are very poignant. And these are all reproduced in the book. This one says, Dear Tom, it's written on the 21st of September 1852. How are you? I finally made it to New York. I had to stay in quarantine for 6 weeks on Ellis Island. That's off the harbour in New York. After 6 weeks, I made my way to New York to buy me a flat. It was the first time I was using dollars, so I kept counting the money as if they were pounds. My flat only had a bed and a toilet and a bath. People in New York are really boring. I tried to talk to someone to ask them what jobs I could get, but he just shrugged and walked away. I don't know when I'll write to you yet, so goodbye for now, from your brother Jim.
I'm always amazed that a couple of lines can give you such a story. Do you know what I mean? You can see so much in those 4 lines, 5 lines of a letter. What it was like.
This is a letter from another neighbour's family. Dear Michael, dear Mary and John Joe, I arrived in Boston safely. I got a job and built in a bank. I'm living in a small apartment, but it's very hot some days. I miss you all so much. The journey was very tough on the Fortuna. 2 people died and were thrown overboard. I made 2 friends, John and James. They came from Ireland too. John and James have a sister called Peggy. I get $5 a month. Please write back soon. Very poignant.
So it's really fantastic, and obviously people can still buy these books. Where would they get them?
They can ask any member of the Historical Society, the History Society, Teresa or Tommy or myself, or they can get it by contacting me by text message.
I think they're brilliant. I really do. I think they're great, and everyone in the parish should have one if they don't have 2.
Thank you for that, Ron.
No, they're very good.
Not only do the children have the project themselves in the schools, but having reproduced them into print format in a book, it means that they can buy one for their granny, or as a gift for their mum and dad or whatever. And this podcast will also spread the word, which is really important.
That's what I'm hoping.
Because online formats, of course, are very important as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're only scraping the surface on this, but it's really just to highlight that they exist. And I think also for people that maybe they live abroad but don't get to get their hands on it. I'm sure if it's interesting and people want to do more podcasts, maybe we'll do a deeper dive on each one and give you a bit more of the stories. But was there anything surprising or unexpected that turned up in the project that stood out to you?
Well, as I said to you, the folk stories were great, but the famine poems and poignant letters, and the number of superb drawings. You know, the pupils, very young pupils, going out and sitting and just drawing their own environments, and coming back in with these wonderful, wonderful drawings, which are all in the books, by the way. And I hope people enjoy them as much as I do. Yeah, that was surprising for me now. A great deal of effort.
Yeah, you were saying there was models and everything.
All sorts of models created, and paper mache models and paper and mala and all sorts of things, you know.
And will there be an opportunity perhaps during History Week to maybe do a presentation of some of them in a room, or was that?
What we're going to do is we're going to do a presentation, I think on the night of the 22nd. I think we'll do a presentation at that stage. Okay.
I think engaging with young people, getting them to understand their own local history and what's under their feet as they wander around or kick a ball against an old stone wall, so maybe they realise there's more to it. But if someone new to Kilmore wanted to understand its history, where would we start? Would we start with that, the superhighway? I like that kind of theory where you go, look, these are all, it's like, think of the waterways as like a superhighway.
You think of the landscape in which you're living. Just look at your own landscape and just absorb that and just observe it very carefully. And this particular instance, it's all about the waterways.
Thank you for listening. For more information on Kilmore Aughrim History Society, or to buy one of the books, go to their Facebook page, or you can contact Camilla Kelly or Tommy Canoe. You can also send them an email on aughrimkilmorehistorysociety@gmail.com. A big thank you to all the teachers and pupils of Dangan, Scraba and Aughrim National Schools, and many thanks to Camilla Kelly for joining me today to help put some colour around this history. Music written and composed for this podcast, presented and edited by myself, Ronán Turner. Get in touch on ronanturner.com. Thanks very much. Good evening.